Hey folks, we're here today at IndieFerm Brewing and Homebrew Supply Shop. I've got with me Bob Knights, our homebrew shop manager. I'm
Folks.
Paul, brewer and owner of IndieFerm. Behind the camera we've got Kim. Say hi, Kim.
Hey.
And we are going to teach you how to brew. We're going to brew Boat for Sale Pale Ale. It's a beer we haven't made for a while, but it was actually a pretty popular beer for quite a while. It's an American Pale Ale that has Azacca and Citra hops primarily. We're going to use a lot of local ingredients, including some nugget hops that we grew ourselves here in Plymouth, and also a bunch of malt from Valley Malt out in Hadley, Massachusetts, out in the western part of the state. So locally malted and grown and in the malt.
Version, right?
And this is the all-grain version. We'll skip ahead at some point and talk about how to do it in about half the time with some extract. But we thought we'd start at the very beginning and do just a small version of what we do here at IndieFerm.
That's right. So here we are, folks, in the grain homebrew shop. Bob again, the guy that runs the joint. And what we're going to do here is pull off some grains for our Boat for Sale Pale Ale that we'll be brewing very shortly. So watch this little process and you can see what is has to be done. We're going to start right over here with Valley Malt, which is locally, well, Western Mass, malted grain. And we're going to use 8 pounds of pale 2-0 to start. So here we go. Put the scale on, it's teared out, so we're at 0, and now we're going to slide over and look for 8 pounds. Let's do the thing, shall we? And it should fill up pretty quick, about, 4/5 or so. There you go. There's your 8. All right, going to Crystal next. Crystal 40 is going in our recipe. It's a caramel malt. Give it a little bit of that rich, sweet kind of flavor in the background. Looks like we want 0.4. Yeah, this will be 5. We'll go to 6.5. Okay. All right, grain number 3 coming up. We're going to do a little bit of rye for our recipe, and we're looking for 1.5 pounds to add, followed by some Vienna, same amount, which in my book is 1 pound 8 ounces. My favorite, rye. Bob can tell you a story about rye, but not right now. All right. 8 and 10 is 18, so 2 pounds of change. And now reset. Beautiful. Yep, right on the money. Then, go back to 0. I'll do one more. Yeah. 1.5 pounds. That's it for grain. All right, last little chore we have before we can go mash is to actually grind the grains. It's pretty all set up, ready to go, and I'm just going to pour it in and watch the magic. Here she goes. Might have to let a little go down first, but just like this. Inside. I'll show. Here she's up. Coming in for you.
Just finished crushing the grain. Got about 13, 14 pounds of grain. We've done our math. We know that we want 1.25 quarts per pound of grain, and we want it going to work out to be about 3.6 gallons, and we want it to be about 165 degrees. So here's gallon number 2. And I'm going to stop after 3 gallons. I'm expecting this is going to be a little hotter than I want it. Let's check it with our digital thermometer. Just about perfect. Let's add our minerals. This is a combination of calcium sulfate, better known as gypsum, calcium chloride, CaCl2, and Epsom salt. So the calcium we want for the acidification of the mash. We're getting kind of complicated here. We're talking water chemistry. It's probably one of the more complicated parts of the whole process, but you don't really need to know and understand it. So a little calcium is good, a little magnesium is good, and that comes from the Epsom salts. And I believe we are good to pour our mash in. Always do the water first and then add the mash to the water. If you can pour, I will paddle. So now let's begin the mash in. Bob's going to pour the grain while I stir. You want to stir and pour at the same time. You don't want to create big dough balls here, because dough balls are too hard to get the good stuff out of, and we'll explain what that is in a minute. Oh, it smells good.
Good speed for you, Mr. Paul.
Yeah, just slow down a little bit now. Now let's get a little thicker. Oh yeah. And finish it up, we'll be good. So we cracked the grain with the grain crusher so that all those barley seeds and rye seeds had their insides opened up and exposed. All that white powder from the inside that's created during the malting process is now dissolving into our mash. So we want to stir this for a couple minutes, make sure it's really thoroughly stirred in. I don't see any dough balls. That's a good thing. We did a good job there. There's a false bottom at the bottom of this that's going to hold the grain in place when we run all this liquid out. And that's coming up in about a half an hour. So we should double check our temperature, which Bob has thought ahead and handed me the thermometer. 151. We want 152. I'll take 151 if that's what we get.
I like 151. I heard a smart man said that's a great temp.
151.7. We'll call that 152, which is exactly what we want. Thank you, sir.
Covers down below.
I think I'll stir for just a little bit more.
Yes, sir.
I find we get a little bit more sugar out of our mash if we stir more thoroughly. You really want to make sure that the hot water is in contact and dissolves all that starchy goodness, while the shells, the husk of all those seeds, is going to provide a filter bed for us. So we want to hydrate this really well, make sure everything's stirred in thoroughly. So we're going to actually compress our time scales a little bit today through the magic of, you don't have to drink this beer, so we can make a half-hour mash. I think it's going to work just fine anyway, because all the enzymatic action that turns the starches into sugars happens in the first 5 or 10 minutes anyway. So a normal mash time, at least in our professional brewery, is about an hour. We'll go for a half hour today, and I'm sure we'll be just fine. I think that covers the mashing. Now we're going to cover it up and let it sit.
Timer's on.
And while we're doing that, while it's doing its thing and the enzymes are converting starch into sugar in here, we can clean our fermenter and a couple other things we need to get going. Okay, so we've let our mash sit for about a half an hour now. That's kind of pushing it a little bit. I think it'll be fine, but you know, a typical mash is usually an hour duration. The last 10 or 15 minutes of which you're going to vorlauf. German words, sorry, it's kind of like sailing. It's a different word for everything, for some reason. But anyway, what we're going to do, vorlauf is where we actually clarify some of the wort and set the filter bed. We're going to start by opening the valve a little bit and draining some of the liquid out. And the first little bit's just water. But there we go, nice and cloudy. We actually want to see it get nice and clear while we're doing this. So I go nice and slow. You don't want to drain all the water out at once. So that's still really cloudy. We're going to let that go for a good, probably half gallon. That's the alarm telling us we've finished the mash.
We've done good.
Okay, so now we've done our mash. We completed the vorlauf through which we're clarifying the future beer. Hopefully the cloudy stuff will stay stuck pretty well in the mash tun. That's what this thing is called here. And let's start draining off what we call the wort, W-O-R-T, another German word, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
And here it comes. Looks pretty clear.
This part is cool. Yeah, it looks good.
Looks pretty good. Looks better than it did when we started the boil off, which is the whole purpose.
That's why we do it. This is how we do it.
So you don't want to go too fast. You can't just open the valve up all the way. You got to kind of take it easy, go slow. And that is flowing beautifully so far. And once we get a couple inches of wort in there, the sugar water, we'll turn on the heat and get it up to a boil as soon as we can. But our goal right now is to get all the sugar we can out of the mash. I'm going to try and collect up to 6.5 gallons of liquid again. So far we've showed you about measuring out your grains, crushing the grain, and then getting the strike water to the right temperature for the mash, and then how to do a mash and convert all those starches that are in the barley, and in this case also the rye, convert those starches into sugars, and that's what the yeast is going to want to eat when it becomes beer. But there is a way to avoid all that. You can actually shorten the process quite a bit, and that's what we want to talk about right now.
Come see me.
Yes, come see our homebrew shop. We've got all the grains, but we also have homebrew kits that include extract. I have a couple of different examples of extract here as well. So the extract is kind of like maple syrup. You know, when you start making maple syrup, you got to have like 30 gallons of water to get maybe a gallon at most of maple syrup out. Well, what the malting companies do is they do essentially that with the sugar water that they make, the same way we just made this 5-6 gallon batch. They're going to take and boil down hundreds and hundreds of gallons to get a malt extract concentrate. This is liquid malt extract concentrate. This particular one is a very light one. And then this one, they go even further. They take it past liquid and they actually vaporize out all the liquid pretty much and get it down to a powdered form. So this is a pound of malt powder. Tastes fantastic. Sticky as heck, but tastes fantastic.
Yep.
And then, if you don't know what you want to brew, we've got a few pre-made kits here. This one is by True Brew. And we can also put together any recipe you want. But some of these pre-made kits, this particular one is a red ale. Of course, we're filming this. I'm not sure when you'll see it, but we're filming this right before St. Patrick's Day.
St. Patty's Day.
So an Irish red ale is very appropriate for the season. And the kit comes with a couple of canisters of the goop, as we call it.
Yep.
That's the extract. It's got some yeast. This happens to be an American California yeast, dry format. We'll talk about that when we get to it. And then we've got some steeping grains, a little bit of melanoid malt for a little bit of color. And then it's got some hops in here as well. And let's see, we got some Mount Hood and some Mount Hood. So we'll talk about hops a little bit in the boil because we're almost ready to start boiling here with our batch of boat for sale. But that's an example kit. That kit is, as I said, an Irish red ale. And we have this in stock at the shop. And we always have quite a few kits. Always put together either an all grain or an extract batch kit for you here at IndieFerm Supply.
First top edition. Stir that right in so that it's nice and smelly. These are whole hops that were grown, a couple miles in? Paul, as the crow flies? At the IndieFerm Hop Farm in Chiltonville. These are nugget hops. Their alpha is above the acidity. For bitterness is about 11%, I think we said, and they go in for the full boil, which in this case is going to be, I think, we're going to do 30 minutes. Adding a little amber DME to beef up our brew here. We're going to have the best of both worlds by the time we're done.
Nice and slow. I'll stir it in so it doesn't scald on the bottom.
Yep.
One thing we're adding extract to water, you want to do it in hot water for one thing so it dissolves in better, but you also want to make sure that you either turn off the flame so that it doesn't scald on the bottom and make a big mess, big black mess, or you want to stir very thoroughly as someone else is pouring it in. And this should raise our gravity by something like 10 points for some combination of reasons. Our extract efficiency was a little lower than we usually expect.
Now we're raising it.
Maybe I was spoiled by bigger scale brewing equipment, but So we're going to add a little bit of dry malt extract to raise that sugar level up a little bit and make the yeast even happier.
And man, is it sticky.
We should end up with a beer that's going to be pretty close to somewhere in 5.5 to 6% alcohol range. Something like 40 IBU. The bitterness comes almost entirely from the hops that we boil for the full boil. So these nugget hops that we grew here in Plymouth, the IndieFerm hop farm, compliment to Wildlands Trust.
There we go.
Yeah, good folks. Nice
Good stuff.
So we've stirred in that malt extract. That's going to help make up for our low extraction efficiency. And we're going to let that boil with the lid off, by the way. Always boil with the lid off. What you want is you really want to lose some of that volume of water. You want to steam off, but more importantly than the volume is you want to get rid of some of those nasty smelling compounds. Some of them don't even show up while you're boiling. They wouldn't show up until the beer is done.
Too late.
So yeah, you want to always boil with the lid off. Be very careful when you're boiling your beer to not let it boil over. In this particular kettle, we got plenty of headspace here. I don't think it could boil over. But if you're near the top of your kettle and you're on your kitchen stove, be very careful. Keep stirring. Keep a spray bottle of water handy to knock down the foam. You just go squirt, squirt, squirt with a spray bottle of spray bottle of water, and that'll knock the foam right down. Here we go with a nice looking boil. Maybe.
Isn't that a beauty?
That looks perfect. So now it's made up for the temperature it lost when we added the dry malt extract.
Yeah, it was cranky before I turned that way down on the
Looks good, smells good, will be good.
I like to stand right here to get
it absorbed in your clothes. You can smell it later.
Yeah, that's right. See, no, I don't work at a brewery.
Gets the wrinkles out of your shirt too.
It does indeed. Next edition of hops at 7 minutes before the end. We'll be the first for, let's just say, a little flavor aroma coming up. It's a mixture of Azaka and Citra. And, oh yeah. You guys smell that? It's really good. Probably not. So in about 4.5 minutes, we're going to do another addition. And then 2 minutes after that, we're going to shut her down. Add what we call a flame out addition. And that's it. We'll cool this bad boy down. Or girl, depending on your point of view. And almost have some beer. All right. All right, here we go. As you can see, 2 minute addition, same thing, Azaka and Citra. We'll have one more after this in 2 minutes at flame up, and that will be done. All right, next. Moving on. Last addition, here we go. Time to shut off the gas. That's a lot of hops, but smells great. We'll be with you soon. All righty. So what we're doing now is going to create a little bit of what they call a whirlpool. And it's just that. It is a whirlpool. We're going to go just like this. Get those hops rotating in there. It's going to be about 20 minutes. Don't have to do it all the time, but we'll just keep it moving here and there. And we're going to spin it around what we call a wort chiller. I'm going to put cold water in. It's going to go around this coil. Never touch the beer, and back out over here is hot water, and it's going to cool it down a lot quicker. That's it. We're going to let it go, and I'm going to leave this right out so we're going to slow down. Just stir it again a couple minutes. Keep that floating around. All right, so now what we're going to do here, that's Paul putting on the cold water, and so cold is coming in through one side right now. Should be pretty warm. So if you need to wash anything, now's the time.
You're coming out pretty warm. Oh, not that much.
Nope. So yeah, that's it. Now we're just we're chilling.
We got the cold water in, the warm water coming out.
Going to contract, boom, put in the middle. In theory.
Gonna aim for about, I think we should go for about 70, 75 degrees. Don't ever put hot wort into a glass fermenter. You gotta chill it first. Or else the thermal stress will crack it. 125. Getting there. So, we chilled our beer down to, our future beer, down to about 72, 75 degrees. That's a little warmer than fermentation temperature, but we know this glass carboy is going to cool that wort down a little bit once it hits it. So right now we're just doing one final stir. What happens is you're using centripetal force to get the more dense hop particles and proteins into the middle and away from the outlet of the kettle. So it's important to do that one last time, let it settle, let it stop spinning this one last time, and then we're ready to start draining it out, and we'll get a whole lot less crud. All right, so we got a couple of steps left to go. We've now completed the boil, including the Whirlpool, in which we added some more hops to get a nice aroma. Let's see, we boiled off about a gallon of liquid, which is what we wanted. That helped concentrate the beer, develop a little bit of color, a little bit of flavor, and also created the bitterness in the hops. Now we've cooled it all down. We're down around the low 70s, which I think is about right for this. And we're now ready to let it fly. Oh, one more thing to mention. We stirred at the very end, after we took the heat exchanger out, we stirred it a few times. And did a nice whirlpool, and what that does is help get a lot of the solid materials that are left over after the boil into a little pyramid in the middle of the boil, a little cone, and that hopefully will keep it from getting out the exit of this. The outlet valve is over on the edge, over on the side here, so hopefully that's going to help keep all that crud in the kettle, and we will find out momentarily. I expect we're going to have to clean this filter off a few times. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of hop stuff.
But looking pretty good already, actually.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Wouldn't that be an initial slug, and then it's gotten way better. So this is something you want to do kind of slow. You want to use a strainer. You got to sanitize that strainer real well. I had it in Star Sand for a while. But all those little crosshairs, all the little screen crossings are places for bacteria and foreign yeast to hide, so you want to clean those real well. Clean the fermenter real well also. We had that sitting with Star Sand in it for a while. That's an acid-based cleaner, not cleaner, but sanitizer. And that should be a nice, safe, happy home for our yeast now, which is really our job. Our job, more than anything as brewers, is to make a safe and happy home for the yeast and nothing else that's alive. You only want your yeast in there. Otherwise, you get all kinds of off flavors that you don't want. So now what we're doing is draining this out. Hopefully it stays clean. Maybe being outdoors at this stage isn't quite ideal because we are exposed a little bit here, and we're talking over it, which I shouldn't probably do. But anyway, I think we're okay with a little breeze here. And then the wort, the unfermented beer now, is falling down into the fermenter and hopefully picking up a little bit of oxygen. This is the one point in the entire brewing process where oxygen is good for your beer. So you want to create a little turbulence. You want to make sure that you have a nice, mixture and everything. The foam you see down there is leftover sanitizer. It can't do any harm. Don't worry about it. They say don't fear the foam.
Don't fear the foam.
Now, I think we're at the point here where we're going to want to.
Close.
I think we're going to want to probably let that drain down for a second.
Give it another one of those. Absolutely.
So the spent grain might get used for making dog treats. I'll have to talk to Rose about that.
Okay.
And
so you don't want the hops in.
Well, that's we'll put the hops in on top. So if I need the hops, we can get those from the top. Okay. One thing you don't want to do is give hops to dogs.
Correct.
Hops and dogs, bad
don't
combination.
Not for long.
Just about done draining our sugar water out of the kettle. All boiled, all hopped up, smelling fantastic. There's a whole lot of crud left in the kettle. Whole hops, pellet hops, a lot of proteins as well that get developed during the boil and coagulate and settle out for us. Leaving that stuff behind, and I think we're just about there. I think if I take any more, I'm just going to grab some of the stuff that we don't want. So let's call that a day. And
one valve.
Now what we're going to do is going to shake that around, if you would, Bob, and we'll aerate it. This is the point where you want some oxygen. Yeast needs oxygen to start its job. But then after this stage, once fermentation starts, then we don't want any more oxygen in our beer. That's why we have things like these airlocks to go on top. We'll show you that in a minute.
She's got some air in there now, boy.
And don't be confused. Some of it's Star Sand.
Oh, I got that. See? You make sure we got it.
Sanitizer bubbles.
And then
I Give that another minute like that, and then we'll throw some yeast in. So we have a package of Saf Ale SO4 here. It's English yeast. Provides a bit of fruity esters and leaves a little bit of residual sugar behind, so it's still, the beer doesn't taste super, super dry. It's kind of middle of the road. Do I have the honors here?
Oh, I insist. You're up there. No, we're not even going to shake it after that. We're going to let it sit.
Now, you can rehydrate yeast like you would do if you were going to be making bread or something like that, but you really don't have to.
Especially in this size.
Yeah, this is the easy way to do it.
Ready?
There's that. Seal it up good.
That should sit down nice and
Let's
flat.
hope it stays
Yeah.
there. And now probably the most dangerous part of the whole process, carrying the wet fermenter to someplace safe, dry, warm, and dark. I tried the orange handle, it did not fit.
I'm taking it with me. Been pleasant. See you at the shop. Say goodbye.
Good night.